I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Desiree Hurtak, musicologist, social scientist.
And I'm Dr. Desiree Hurtak. I'm a futurist and environmentalist, but I work a lot with sound vibrations.
And we've just come out with a new book called Sound. But the subtitle is dealing with everything connected with sound.
Right. Profound experiences with chanting, toning, music, and healing frequencies. And we're excited to have our very good friends from Australia, Darren Curtis and Bradley Pitt. They're with Sacred Resonance, and they contributed to this book.
And they're also members of our Academy for Future Science, which explores the world of the future through consciousness, through music and sacred language. So welcome aboard, Darren and Brad. We appreciate all of the work that you're doing, all of the great research experiments that you've done with the plant kingdom. And the exciting title of your chapter in our book is Our Work with the Music of Plants. So how did you get started and why the plant world is so important?
Well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you
for having us on.
Well, I guess why it's so important to us, I guess it's the environmental message. It's bringing people back to a certain connection back to the natural kingdom and working with plants and working with the environment. And Darren and I actually did a lot of work in our early years in environmental work, and we had a great interest in actually bringing this message to people, is to help them to find a new connection, a special connection with nature. So this has naturally evolved into working with our work with music, into working with the plants.
We've been inspired to bring those unhidden or those hidden worlds of those sound frequencies that the mystics talked about, those invisible realms, and to bring it into the visible, or bring it from the inaudible to the audible. The spiritual dimension had the spiritual sounds and what we call the sound garden, and how to bring that through and to give people experience of those invisible worlds, invisible sounds.
So we look back at musical history. Hermann Helmholtz, the great German musicologist, went into all of the mechanics of musical coherency, but it was not until the 1960s and 70s with Marcel Vogel at IBM, Chris Bird also working with various sound wave communications that even the American intelligence community used, that people discovered, wait a minute, there's a whole new area of biomusic that connects us with the minds and the properties of plant communication.
Right, and you have some amazing devices. I know we went to Damenhor, and they've been working with this for a long time. You've also developed your own way of hearing plants, and on the website connected with the book, we're going to have a little bit of plant music, but just talk about how you do this and why you started with it.
Well, we were inspired by one of our colleagues, Sam Cuscamano from Electricity for Progress, and he was trying to develop these units that allow it to take it from a very expensive or technical into a real portable process. So we could give people in the public or the audience through art an experience of these devices. So back in 2000 and the early 2000s, we had come across, of course, the work of Dr. Marcel Vogel and plant communication at IBM, and Cleve Baxter and Christopher Bird and The Secret Life of Plants, and just inspired, how can we bring this to people? How can we get people in touch with nature? And we contacted Sam from Electricity for Progress. How can we make these devices portable? How can we work with them on a smaller scale? We had met the Damaher community back here in Australia, and they had these large-scale devices that were quite expensive. And so we knew technology was getting cheaper. We knew that people would want to explore more about consciousness of the research in the 70s. And from that, we helped with Sam develop these little small devices, which were Bluetooth and wireless, and allowed multiple of them to be used, and start looking at the different rhythms of plants, even in our homes. And of course, then we brought it out to the public in art.
And also because we do a lot of installation work in our artwork that we do here back at home. And with Sacred Resonance, we've always been interested in looking at resonance and how everything has a vibration, everything has a frequency of resonance. So we've explored from everything from looking at the stars and measuring sounds, as in the cosmos of NASA's been doing, but even to our own biology. We've done even testing on our own body and produced sound from it. And of course, then looking with plants and other ways we can actually work with sound. So it's looking at a whole array of different ways we can work with music.
Well, I like to just say that you guys get people from the public together in arboretums, and you've hooked up about 15 plants, and then people walk and they're hearing the music of the sound. It's fabulous because normally people practically ignore plants, and half of the people walk on top of plants if they are in their way. But now you kind of introduce the fact that these are living, we'll say, sounding thoughts of energy, of intelligence in a certain sense. Of course, that's what Marcel Vogel and Chris Bird were talking about. That
Secret Life of Plants, which is the classic, and the Keys of Enoch, which we wrote some years back, actually in 1973, really requires musical vibrations to understand the different levels of consciousness development. So your work with plant communication is so important because it's showing on a popular level that we're all interconnected. We are a unified species connected with the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and beyond. And it's important that we wake up and realize now we have an opportunity through new electronics and what we will call new breakthroughs to realize that we are a body electric. We are discovering that we can play on the higher keyboard or the lower keyboard with not only the plants, but basically even the angelic intelligences that the ancients dreamed about. We are a living keyboard. And I'd like you to discuss a little bit more of why and how you came to work with certain frequencies.
Well, I just want to mention, when we're talking about the what we've done here and some of the experiences, I mean, we approached the festival here, which is the Adelaide Fringe Festival, which is one of the biggest festivals or art festivals in the Southern Hemisphere. And we've been involved in it for many years, but we wanted to approach our local botanic gardens here, or the Botanic Gardens of Adelaide, and to tell them we want to do this installation. We want to take people through an experience where they touch the plants and hear the music. And it was hard to convince at first. I mean, some of them thought we were a little strange what we're offering, but the response has been quite overwhelming. I mean, we've actually seen people have the most unique experience interacting with the plants. And how we sort of sold it to them and got some of the funding was to say that this is another way for people to relate to the plant kingdom, a more of a spiritual way to connect, that it actually, whatever you think and do and how you interact with the plants, do respond.
And I think this is also coming in the popular milieu of understanding of what's called plant bioacoustics. One of the head research fellows in Sydney now, Monica Galagano, she's from Adelaide, and she originally back in her research wanted to take a relook at this idea that plants and other trees are emitting sound. And now we're finding everything from ultrasonic frequencies that are emitting from flowers that bees can hear to clicking sounds that are audible in root systems of 220 hertz. There's a whole sound garden. And I think this is what the revolution about forest bathing is, and people moving back into nature. There's a whole lot of frequencies that were missing in the sense the garden of creation, and putting people back in touch with that. People are feeling reconnected. People are feeling a rejuvenation of their spirit.
And I just want to, let me interrupt for a minute because I want to qualify what you're saying. For those people who hadn't heard plant music, of course, go to the website that's listed with the book. But, it's not just like a hum that you hear or one tone. And if you go close to them and you think about them or touch them, their sounds usually increase, and they do more tones. They do all different tones. It's an amazing thing. And if you leave them alone, sometimes they'll just go quiet. It's amazing that it's not just the sound of a plant. And I think that's important. We're saying that the same thing in the book regarding the sound of the body, that there's so many sounds in the body. The Royal Rife looked at coming up with one sound that would heal this or that. But what we're finding now in the 21st century is that it's a multitude of sounds. It's a whole symphony of sounds. And that's also what the plants seem to put out.
And this is why our book, with your contributions, is so important, because it illustrates the 7 chakras or 7 levels, from the microbiological to the vibrations of the human heart to the visualizations of coherency that the mind can program. So more music is brought into harmonics with nature, and even harmonics, what we call supernature or higher consciousness, can bring about positive resolution. Again, our motto for the Academy is there are no problems, only solutions. And that comes really through vibrations.
And Brad, I'd like you to continue what you were saying, but I also want to move into something that you helped contribute in the book, and that is a couple of pictures of cymatics. Can you also describe why that's so important?
I just want to mention first about how we got into it. We met in 1998, and we wanted to explore everything about sound and how it can put us into altered states of consciousness. So in deep states of meditation, we were doing transcendental meditation at the time. I started hearing other levels of sound, like the buzzing of bees, the ringing of bells, different chimes. And I started reading about this in ancient scriptures, that in different levels of consciousness, there's different levels of sound. And I thought, what are these sounds? What are these tones? And electronic music had just in the early 2000s just started coming into universities in Australia. And so we decided, well, how do we recreate this? We heard the music of Yassos. We heard the music of Stephen Harplin, interdimensional music and new age music. And we thought, we're also hearing these tones and frequencies. And it's from an overself level, as we had learned from the Keys of Enoch in our work. How do we bring this through? And we knew that electronic music and this binaural beats and these other frequencies that we could find could put us into this state.
And also we had this certain experience. I mean, when we're using certain chants and mantras, we had certain paraphysical experiences, which told us, a journey with sacred resonance. I mean, it's fine studying resonance, but we have to find the sacred connection to it. And so our journey has been finding the sacred component to resonance, to frequencies, because everything is frequency. Mm. And this was when we had an experience in 2009 during a festival where we actually had a plant up on the stage. It was really quite abstract what we did, but I mean, we put a plant on the stage, and we got the audience to interact with it, just to meditate with it as we played certain music. And this was inspired by a book called The Prelude to Landing Upon Earth. There was something mentioned in there about an osmosis effect with a plant, and it sort of inspired us to do something similar. Why don't we try this out? And even though it wasn't aimed at as a spiritual event, the audience had some interesting experiences, and people came up afterwards and told us how they had all these experiences where they, have visions of meeting, someone they've passed on recently or so forth, and healing. And we were quite amazed that there's more than just music going on or sound, but there's something else happening even as a biotransducer through the plant. There's some sort of interaction that we thought was unique, which of course in some of your books mentions this even with the trees, and that there is this bioresonance or what you call, a bioantenna sort of effect with the plant kingdom. But also we did another experience with cymatics, is that, of course, if sound then produces geometry, and we know this mentions in 1 John, that we were interested then in Hans Jenny's work, looking at cymatics. And so, of course, we had got a funding back again at another festival to try and actually recreate one of these devices. And so we did an event in these underground tunnels here, which we took people through an experience with cymatics and sounds.
But this also inspired us, the idea that we are living in a water biosphere. Our bodies are 60 to 70% water. And we're fascinated by whale communication and dolphin communication, and how sound travels differently through water. And could we compose frequencies and sound that work with water resonance rather than air resonance? And this is how we explore cymatics, and we had all these different waves called solitonic waves and all these other exotic vibrations of sound. And we realized that the ancients, through membranes and sand mandalas, could use sound to create geometric patterns. And we realized then that certain mantras and certain sacred sounds produce certain geometric forms, not only physically, but also they understood this spiritually as well. And how could we recreate this to show people the power of sound?
Well, we are
Go ahead.
interested in our work with others like yourselves throughout the world, using mantra or sacred expressions so that the inner soundscape of the heart, mind, and spirit is activated and directed collectively to areas of the world where sound links can produce healing. Sound links can produce a worldwide global communication. Sound links can also be used for the new science of remote viewings that was studied and pioneered by two of my colleagues at Stanford Research Institute in California, showing that we're all linked through different vibratory levels. But rather than being on one level of classical music or one level of what we will call plant music, we're on all levels simultaneously. And that's the key and the genius of our book. Together, the soundscape of creation is working through us. And King David refers to us in the Psalms as really representing the kingdom of music. We are basically, shall we say, introducing the world to areas that are off the charts.
Well, I just want to say for people who don't understand what we're saying about cymatics, that maybe, Darren, you can explain exactly how you created the pictures that are, and I'm just going to put it quickly, in our book. And one is at 64 hertz, and you could tell that they're actually every frequency, pretty much every hertz, right, which is also cycles per second, has a different geometry. And so that's really important. So it's not just one geometry you get with putting out sound, you get actually the multitude. And some people are talking about, of course, sacred geometry. You're doing sacred resonance. Tell us just a little bit more about cymatics.
So basically what you do, you get a membrane or with sound on it, this is in the work of Chladni's research, going back to Da Vinci, but more modernly with Hans Jenny is using speakers, audio speakers, and putting little dishes on there with water or other substances that had the viscosity similar to water and more gel-based liquids. But basically we use water and producing a frequency, certain sine tones, but also audible chants that are recorded through the speaker, vibrates the membrane on the speaker and produces certain geometrical relationships. So we've been exploring different mantras and different sacred sounds and different frequencies. And we find this example in caves or in pyramids around the world, that the certain resonance of the chamber produces certain overtones and certain harmonics. Also, the dishes at certain sizes also produce different geometry. So ourselves, a vibrating membrane, not just the brain waves and not just the skin, but the whole body, the bone structure, a whole body is like a vibrating membrane. And so we're trying to show people that we are living vibrating membrane, and this is what sound can do to us on different frequencies, all the way from the ultrasonic to the subsonic realms.
Well, certainly all life is vibration. And I have to say that Sacred Resonance, which is your organization in Australia, has put together a cymatic machine so you can film and gather the data, what sound and what geometry relates together. And then also, of course, even also for the plant. I didn't realize that you actually have created your own plant music device. That is just a little box that literally hooks into the leaf of the plant and the soil of the plant. And actually then with the speaker, these are all algorithms that are unique. And you get to start hearing these sacred geometries and sacred sounds.
So we live in an age. We live in an age of symphonic synergy, energy and sound coming from all directions, and we have natural coherency. But you obviously were brought into our teaching of the Academy because you were interested also in sacred resonance, sacred coherency. And that's a whole different idea of superimposing certain musical compositions on the human consciousness and raising consciousness so people can come out of a world of despair and violence into a world of joy and purpose.
Well, let me just add, so the last part of this book talks about the temples that we visited and the sacred places that you visited in Australia, and that you've done music and sound in these places, and the whole resonance is amazing. I think with you, Darren, we were recently in Chartres Cathedral in France, and that has an amazing resonance. And anyway,
so each sacred area of the world has a certain resonance, but now we need all of the sacred resonance points to converge, because our world, we believe, is going into planetary changes, and the vibratory rate is going to change for the human system. And we need to be prepared for what I call the fifth dimension, the elevation of consciousness to work synergistically.
Well, hopefully the right sound opens up the chakras in the body. And that's why at the end we put the different traditional sacred sounds for each of the chakras. And hopefully we'll be able to do some music related to this as well. We'll talk a little bit about the sacred zones that you've been in and how you feel the sacred resonance works.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when we first met, we actually went up into a local sacred zone here, which is in the Flinders Ranges in South Australia. And it's one of the major grid points. And if you look at the map of the Keys of Enoch that actually you see over Australia, you see the point on there. And Darren and I met there, and we had some profound experiences, like Darren mentioned, hearing music and having these other consciousness experiences. And of course, the Keys of Enoch was what brought us together. I had the Keys of Enoch, and Darren was also heard about it. And so naturally, we came together to work with it and use it. And by using the sacred mantras and the music, and Darren, singing, and we led groups up there to sing the names, we had very, very amazing experiences where we saw different paraphysical lights and certain things appeared. And it's interesting with geometry because when I hear music, I see it in color. And sometimes if I'm in a deep meditation, this is how we work together. When Darren composes, I also listen, and also, as in an artistic or like painting, paint the colors with it. And so we work together, try bringing the color and the sound together in a unique relationship. And which then allowed us, when we worked in these sacred sites, where we start composing music and sometimes even actually gone there to actually perform with no audience, just the birds and nature, and just created this unique experience where we can go into a higher state of consciousness. And
also your work, if I can carry on, your work has taken you into what is called axial tonal music, which of course accepts the fact that our human body is a coordination of different energy circuits. And if one can master the circuitry of the body, one can be in harmony not only with the physical environment, but also the greater environment of the earth itself and beyond the star channels the ancients connected with the acupuncture points of the body.
Well, my background is in astronomy. And so naturally, I was attracted to certain keys, like certain keys that talk about the axonal lines that connect to resonating star systems. And I think Darren and I, we're wondering, how can we bring these two levels together more practically and experience this? And a lot of our friends were getting into things like drugs and stuff like this for experiences. And Darren and I were not attracted to that. We thought, if this is a real experience and it's tangible, then you should be able to do this without taking any form of mind substance. So we use music. We found that by triggering certain states of consciousness through sounds and mantras, we could go into those states and have certain experiences, which was a lot more profound than what some of these people were doing with just taking substances.
We found this in the First Nations peoples and in different cultures around the world, in the sacred sites, within caves or in temples, understood there's certain resonance patterns within these chambers or within these caves that could put your brain waves and put your body into like alpha states, theta and delta states. And they're not over 3 or 4 minutes as we have now in the entertainment industry, but moving into 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes of actually into an hour of resonance of sound, where it brings your body into this state. And we found that using binaural beats and different other tonal frequencies, we could, as Robert Monroe showed in his work in using binaural beats at the Monroe Institute, we could go out of our body or have in what we call the overself reality. In a sense, the sounds of the overself, we could hear, and we could also work, as you were saying, through different paraphysical abilities of the mind to become more dynamic, to become more expanded, but to also feel a resonance of the heart and the mind coming together, to show that we can bring ourselves back, our body, mind, and spirit back into a balance to go through stressful situations or go through all these things.
And vibrational medicine, I mean, we were studying a lot of this years ago, and of course using music is to heal the body. And so with Cymatics and all this showing, if there is a certain effect upon the water, then how is it affecting the water within our own body, and how we can create that resonance within ours that is unique.
Well, I just want to say, if people want to know more, they should get the book. And we do talk about the alpha frequency of the brain, which is connected with dream state and meditation, and also the binaural beats, which Darren has given to me. I sometimes use those. It's really creating that alpha state between comparison.
Your music is fantastic. We feel honored. I knew Igor Stravinsky, and with his Rite of Spring, he changed the musical world in the early 20th century. That we have the capacity to go beyond the normal training of music into higher frequencies. And with these higher frequencies, we can move rocks, we can teleportate objects, we can heal people, and even understand how the Great Pyramid of Egypt represents the different parts of the body and a sort of a synchronicity of initiation to higher levels of cosmology. So we're at a time of vast planetary, mental, psychological, and cosmological change. And music that is coherent, that is loving, that is divine-centered, is the spark of life that keeps us all together with a whole great future ahead of us. So I wanted to thank both of you for the great and excellent work you're doing in Australia. And again, through your work and through other musicians that were working in every country of the world, from Peter Volger in Germany to Paul Thomas Burns in Mexico to those in Japan and China, We're all part of raising the consciousness with what our great colleague, Carlos Santana, calls the global tone. We want to raise our consciousness in a harmonic that can help all life, plant life, animal life, human life, in all cultures, because we are all together in sound through birth, through life, and through transition into the new worlds.
So thank you both. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we also want to thank you both for also the Keys of Enoch. I mean, it was actually what brought us together, and it's actually been really our roadmap the entire time and journey, even with the sound and all the other work we've been doing. So thank you.
Well, the Keys of Enoch, again, for those who are not aware of this, shows the dove, which is a symbol of peace, harmony, and sacred language, and music coming down with 7 rays of light representing the 7 seals or chakras that are brought together into a harmonic of opportunity and joy.
Well, really, of course, and your names are on the book here. So thank you all for helping us, being part of it. And we talk about your work even in our chapters. So it's fabulous. And get it. I know you can get it on Amazon and probably connect it with SacredStories Publishing as well. So.
And behind us is the constellation we know as the Pleiades. We were just with the Hopi elders here in Arizona. And they said there's music of the stars that is increasing now within the inner consciousness. The world is going to go through some major changes, and music will help us dance with the stars and dance with human nature. So we all appreciate the great contributions we will continue to make. And so signing off from the Academy for Future Science here in Arizona to all of you worldwide. And we thank Ari for putting all of us together in conversation. So Ari, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys in Australia, thank you so much.
Much love.
And all of you out there watching this program, thank you for so much for being aware that we're going into a new future, a whole new resonance of the 5th dimension, requiring that we understand what the great prophet spoke about, that the human body is the temple of the divine spirit. We put all the pieces together. We are the trumpets. We are the celebration. We are the dance of the eternal and human form.
And it opens us to higher dimensions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.